Well, the last component that we are going to discuss now is spatial relations. As mentioned earlier, spatial relations indicate the space that we maintain, the distance that we maintain while talking to each other. We all have our personal space. The distance to which we allow people to get close to us depends on our degree of comfort and familiarity with them. Broadly, there are four categories of people whom we get into various zones or into various degrees in our space. They could be called as close family or friends, professional contacts, transactional contacts, and public contacts. So, accordingly, we have these different distances which are divided into different categories. For people from each of these categories, we create a zone or a distance, okay? And the zones we create around us, sometimes consciously and more often naturally, can be divided into the following categories: intimate distance or the intimate zone, personal zone or the personal distance, social zone, the social distance, and the public distance, the public zone. Well, we will be discussing all these spatial distances in detail now. Anthropologist Edward Hall had come up with this theory that these particular kind of distances should be maintained while communicating in a general scenario. Well, the first one, intimate zone or the intimate distance, it should be approximately 6 to 18 inches from us. This is the area around us that we guard sensitively. It is the space that we reserve for ourselves and to a chosen few. We do not allow or appreciate most other people's entry into this space. Those who can get into this space are our close family members, such as our children, spouses, parents, siblings, and of course, very close friends. So, this is the first spatial relation that is called as intimate distance. The next one is the personal distance. This is the area around us that we allow entry to our professional contacts only. This is mentioned as 1.5 to 4 feet. The examples could be office colleagues meeting us for discussions, meeting our professional contacts over dinner, etc. This is typically encountered during intense problem solving session among colleagues, or when teams pour their interest to gaze over a particular diagram to come up with a solution, etc. So basically in professional discussions. The personal zone also varies with culture. What is an acceptable personal zone in the Asian culture may not be so in the Western world. One needs to be conscious about these cultural variations in professional settings, as we had also discussed this particular factor in eye contact. In different cultures, it is considered offensive to stare continuously into someone's eyes, and it is also considered offensive not to look into somebody's eyes and to make conversation. So you need to be very much conscious about these cultural differences, and you should be aware of these cultural differences. For example, if a person gets too close to another during a professional discussion with someone from another culture, and the other person takes a few steps backward to maintain the appropriate distance, it signifies the span of the personal zone, and it is a sort of clue that must always be picked up and respected. Crossing this line may lead to undesirable consequences. So that's why people have to be very much conscious during this personal distance, because it has to be considered as a professional distance only. The next one The next spatial relation is the social distance. It is considered as 4 to 12 feet. Basically, these are all your transactional contacts. They are typically people we do not know very well or are meeting for the first time. The purpose of the contact here is often to talk about buying or selling commodities, to render a service, etc. So it could be our vendors or clients. Since the transaction can be unpleasant, the social zone radius is usually higher to unconsciously prevent discomfort in the course of the discussion. A breach of this zone, for example, by aggressive salespeople, is usually not appreciated. People feel uncomfortable and leads to the person responding by receding a few steps backward to indicate through his body language that this aggressive intrusion by an unfamiliar person beyond acceptable limits is definitely unwelcome. In some cases, however, with people transacting business with us regularly and the familiarity has increased over time, we allow our social zone or the social distance to range from around 3 to 4 feet also, if in case the familiarity and friendliness has increased over the time. Well, the next one is the public zone, the public distance, which is usually considered to be maintained for around from 12 to 25 feet, and this is the zone that we keep for our public presentations addressed to a large audience, etc. Well, this is the area where we expect to have the audience seated uh, while giving speech, for example. Keeping this distance allows us to have an eye contact with the audience that extends from left to right and extending far into the room. So, this is all about the spatial relations. Well, there are some incidences or situations when people feel that their personal space that is being intruded. It is not welcome to, intrude somebody's personal space. When does this happen? Well, the typical body language tells you when the zones are intruded. People's reaction when their zones are intruded may vary, and some common reactions leading to body language signals could be explained. Well, for example, moving backward to maintain the desired zone distance. This shows that somebody is uncomfortable. Expressing displeasure through annoyed stare or body gesture. This also shows that you are intruding somebody's space. Just moving away to another person in some pretext. This can happen during a communication or intruding a space with a female employee. Appear disinterested in the conversation. This can also indicate that you are intruding somebody's personal space. And guarding oneself zealously through folded arms and stunned looks. This also shows a kind of intruding of somebody's personal space. Let's just see a few examples that will explain you the recommended zones in professional settings. For example, in a situation like meeting an industry colleague at a cocktail party, this is a personal zone, so the distance can be maintained, could be around 1 meter. Crisis handling at work, so this is again a personal zone. The distance that can be maintained is around 50 centimeter. Strategy session at a location remote to the workplace. This is again a personal zone, so the distance that can be maintained is around 2 meters. Discussions with a known colleague from an international location of the same company. This is again a personal zone, and distance that can be maintained is around 1.2 meter. Project status update by a project leader and his team to his supervisor. This is again a personal zone, and the distance that can be maintained is 1.5 meter. Making a presentation to a group of government dignitaries. This is a public zone, and distance that can be maintained is around 3.6 meter. Customer discussions. This is a social zone. like for with the clients and vendors. So in social zone, the distance that can be maintained is around 2.5 meter. And discussion with a supplier, this is again a social zone, distance that can be maintained is around 2 meters. Performance assessment discussion with a person reporting to you, this is again a personal zone, and distance that can be maintained is around 1 meter. So these are few examples that illuminates what sort of distance should be maintained in different kind of scenario in a professional setup.